I'm so tired of being without a man, the Apache woman said. Lone Rancher Naya woke up before the sun, as she had every morning for years.
The first light of dawn barely touched the wide plains surrounding her small ranch, but she was already on her feet, boots worn and hands calloused from years of work. The wind carried a chill, brushing against her face as she stepped outside. The smell of dew on the grass filled the air, mingling with the scent of hay and animals. For some, this peaceful morning might have seemed beautiful, but for Naya it was just another reminder of the quiet emptiness that had settled around her life. Her ranch was small but tidy. The wooden fence that ran along the perimeter had been repaired many times, and the barn, though old, stood strong against the weather. Chickens clucked near the coop, and a few goats grazed lazily in the yard. Naya loved her animals. They were reliable, honest, and never judged her. They did not care about the loneliness that had slowly grown in her heart over the years. They did not care that she went weeks without speaking to another adult. They simply existed alongside her, offering the only companionship she had grown to know. As she fed the animals, Naya's mind wandered to memories of the past. She remembered a time when she had hoped to share her life with someone, a man who could walk beside her through the long days and the cold nights. But life had not been kind. Men came and went, some leaving after a few weeks, others never intending to stay at all. Each time, she felt a piece of her hope slip away, leaving only a quiet sadness. She shook her head, trying to push the thought away. There was work to be done. The fences needed mending, the animals needed feeding, and the land required constant care. Her life was full, yes, but it lacked the warmth she longed for, the warmth of someone who could truly be by her side. By mid-morning, the sun had climbed higher, and Naya had finished her chores for the moment. She carried a bucket of water to the barn and paused to look out over the fields around. The land stretched endlessly, golden and green in patches, a living reminder of all she had built. She had inherited the ranch from her parents, who had taught her the skills she now relied on every day. Their voices echoed in her mind as she worked, reminding her of lessons learned long ago. Patience, strength, and independence. She was proud of what she had accomplished, yet the pride felt hollow without someone to share it with. Pass. Sometimes in the quiet moments she whispered to herself, "I'm so tired of being without a man." The words lingered in the air, heavy and true. After finishing her morning chores, Naya walked to the edge of her property where a small path led into the nearby woods. She liked to take these walks when she could, not because she was lonely, but because it gave her a chance to think. The path was lined with wild flowers and the occasional tall oak tree that provided shade during the hot afternoons. Birds sang above, and the wind rustled the leaves, making a gentle, comforting sound.
But even here, surrounded by beauty, her heart felt an ache.
She imagined what it would be like to have someone walking beside her, someone who could understand her without words, someone who could laugh with her at small things and share in the quiet satisfaction of a day's work well done. She sighed, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face, and continued down the path, lost in thought. As she walked, memories of her brief romances came back to her. There had been Jonas, who promised the world but left when life got difficult. There was Tomas, whose charm had seemed genuine, until it faded after a few months. And then there were others. Men who never stayed long enough to make a real mark on her heart. Each memory carried a mix of pain and lessons learned, teaching her that trust could be fragile and hope could be dangerous. Yet, despite everything, she still found herself yearning for connection. She wanted a partner, someone who could be both her companion and her equal, someone who could stand with her through the challenges of ranch life and celebrate the victories, no matter how small. By noon, the sun was high, and the heat began to press down on the land. Naya returned to the ranch to fetch lunch, preparing a simple meal of bread, cheese, and fresh vegetables from her small garden. She ate alone, as she often did, listening to the distant sounds of the town, which felt both comforting and isolating. She sometimes imagined what life would be like in the town, surrounded by people and activity, but she quickly shook the thought away. Her heart belonged to her land, and she could not imagine leaving it. Yet she wondered if staying meant she would always be alone, living a life full of work but empty of the companionship she craved. After lunch, Naya decided to tend to the barn. The horses needed brushing and the smell of hay called for attention. As she worked, she found solace in the routine. Brace. Each stroke of the brush against the horses' coats reminded her that she was capable, strong, and resilient. Her hands, though rough and calloused, were skilled and steady. Brace. She could handle the physical labor. She could survive the harsh weather, and she could manage the challenges that came with ranch life. But she could not survive the quiet ache in her heart, the emptiness that lingered when the work was done and the animals were fed. She wanted a companion, someone who could share in her responsibilities, yes, but more importantly, someone who could share in her life. As the afternoon passed, Naya climbed to the top of a small hill on her property to check the fences and survey her land. The view stretched endlessly, a mix of rolling fields and distant mountains. She felt a sense of pride at what she had accomplished, at the life she had built from nothing but determination and hard work. But yet, standing there looking at the land she loved so deeply, a familiar sadness returned. She longed for someone who could stand beside her on this hill, someone who could see the world through her eyes and appreciate it with her. Her thoughts drifted once more to the words she often whispered to herself. "I'm so tired of being without a man." The wind seemed to carry her words away, and for a moment she felt both relief and loneliness at the same time. Evening came, and the sky painted itself in shades of orange, pink, and purple. Naya finished her last chores of the day, feeding the animals one final time, and checking the gates to make sure everything was secure. The ranch was quiet, the kind of quiet that could be peaceful but also heavy when one was alone. She sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, feeling the cool breeze on her face. The world was beautiful, yes, but it was empty without someone to share it with. She thought about the future, about what it might bring, and though she tried to hold on to hope, the shadow of loneliness lingered. As darkness settled, Naya lit a small lamp inside her house and sat by the window, gazing out at the starlit sky. The stars were countless and bright, a reminder of how vast the world was and how small she felt within it. Brave. She wondered if somewhere out there someone like her existed, someone who wanted the same things she did, someone who had faced struggles and longed for connection. She allowed herself a small smile, imagining that perhaps one day the loneliness would end. But until that day came, she would continue her life as she always had, strong, capable, and quietly longing for the companionship she had always dreamed of. And as she closed her eyes that night, the whisper of her own words echoed softly in her mind, carrying the weight of truth and hope alike. "I'm so tired of being without a man." It was not just a complaint, it was a longing, a wish for a life richer than work and solitude. A heart open to the possibility that life could change when least expected. Breaths. She drifted into sleep with the hope that tomorrow might bring something new, something that could fill the emptiness she had carried for so long. The following morning, Naya woke to a quiet stir outside her window. Something was different in the air. The wind carried a scent she could not place at first, a mixture of dust, leather, and smoke. Curious, she stepped outside and noticed a figure on horseback in the distance, moving slowly along the dirt road that led past her ranch. The man seemed deliberate in his steps, surveying the land as if he were searching for something. Naya squinted against the morning sun, her heart quickening with a mix of curiosity and caution. Visitors were rare in these parts, and strangers even rarer. The man's horse slowed as he approached the edge of her property. Naya straightened, wiping her hands on her apron, and called out, "Good morning!" "Can I help you?" The figure stopped and raised his hand in greeting, His face was rugged, tanned from years in the sun, with eyes that seemed to hold both a quiet sadness and a careful strength. There was something different about him, something that made Naya feel a flutter of both caution and intrigue.
"I'm looking for a place to settle," the man said in a calm voice.
"I heard there's land around here and I could use a quiet spot to work." His name was Eli, he explained, and he had been traveling for months, moving from town to town, seeking work in a place where he could finally call home. He spoke simply, without exaggeration, and yet there was a depth to his words that suggested life had been both hard and lonely. Naya listened, unsure what to say. She was used to dealing with strangers, but something about Eli made her pause. "I own this ranch," Naya replied carefully. "It's not for sale, and I don't often have visitors." She stepped closer, instinctively protective of her land and animals. "If you need directions or food, you might find the town a better option." "I understand," he said. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just needed a place to rest and think for a bit. Maybe fix some things while I decide where to go next." His voice was steady, yet there was a vulnerability to it that caught Naya off guard. Most men she had encountered were loud, boastful, or insistent. Eli was none of those things. He seemed different. The day passed with a quiet tension in the air. Naya went about her chores, her eyes occasionally drifting to Eli as he set up a small camp just outside her property line. He was methodical and careful, repairing his wagon and tending to his horse without complaint. Naya felt a strange mix of curiosity and hesitation. She wanted to know more about him, but a lifetime of solitude had taught her caution. She reminded herself that men often came and went, leaving promises broken in their wake. That afternoon, a sudden gust of wind carried a loose fence panel into the path of Eli's horse. Startled, the animal reared slightly, and Eli struggled to regain control. Naya's instincts kicked in immediately. She grabbed a sturdy piece of rope and ran toward them. "Hold on!" she shouted, rushing forward. With a swift movement, she secured the fence panel and helped calm the horse. Eli's hands were firm on the reins, but the gratitude in his eyes was clear. "Thank you," he said, once the horse was steady. "I would have been in trouble if you hadn't come." There was sincerity in his voice, a quiet honesty that made Naya's heart flutter. For a brief moment she saw a side of him that was strong but approachable, capable yet humble, brushing a strand of hair from her face.
It's nothing.
"Rask, happens all the time with these fences," she replied, trying to mask the small excitement that had stirred within her. Over the next few days, Eli lingered near the ranch. Naya noticed him helping with small tasks, like fixing a broken wheel on the cart or stacking firewood. He did not intrude but offered assistance when needed, a silent presence that slowly began to weave into the rhythm of her days. At first, she resisted the closeness, reminding herself that she had survived alone for years. But there was something comforting about his steady work, his quiet laugh when a goat mischievously knocked over a bucket, and the way he listened without judgment when she spoke. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Eli approached her while she was tending to the animals. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice gentle. She hesitated but then nodded, realizing she did not mind the company. They worked side by side, her hands brushing against his as they carried buckets of water. The silence between them was easy, not forced or awkward. For the first time in a long while, Naya felt a warmth she had almost forgotten existed. They shared stories as they worked. Eli spoke of distant towns he had visited, of fleeting friendships and lost opportunities. Naya shared tales of her life on the ranch, the struggles of living alone, and the dream she had once held.
Each story revealed more of their hearts, their strengths, and their vulnerabilities.
But Naya began to see that Eli was not like the other men she had known. He was quiet, thoughtful, and perhaps, in some small way, as lonely as she had been for so long. Yet, Despite the growing connection, Naya felt a tension within herself. She was wary of opening her heart, of letting someone into a life she had built with her own hands. But loneliness had been a constant companion, yes, but it was predictable and safe. Allowing Eli closer meant risking disappointment, a risk she had been unwilling to take for years. But she reminded herself of the pain of the past, of hearts broken and trust betrayed. And yet every time she saw him smile at the animals or catch her hand to steady a bucket, she felt a spark, a quiet hope that perhaps life could be different. One late afternoon, a sudden storm rolled in from the mountains. Dark clouds covered the sky, and the wind picked up, carrying sheets of rain that soaked the land in moments. Naya hurried to secure the animals and close the barn doors. Eli appeared at the edge of the property, urging her to take shelter.
"Come inside!"
he called over the roar of the storm.
"It's not safe out here alone!"
Naya hesitated, but then realized the truth in his words. She stepped inside the barn, and together they watched the rain pour down, the storm's intensity forcing them close in the small space.
In that moment, Naya felt something shift.
The storm outside seemed to mirror the storm inside her heart. The fear, the hesitation, and the longing all mixed together. She glanced at Eli, noticing the way his eyes reflected concern and kindness. He offered her a small smile, and for the first time in years, she felt a flicker of trust. Maybe, just maybe, this man who had appeared unexpectedly could be more than a visitor.
Maybe he could be someone who understood the quiet ache that had lived within her for so long. After the storm passed, Eli helped her repair minor damage caused by the wind. Together, they worked through the evening, their hands sometimes brushing, their laughter mingling with the sounds of the animals returning to calm. Naya realized that she had been yearning for someone like him, not just for companionship, but for understanding, for partnership, for a presence that felt steady and true. She had spent so long alone guarding her heart, but Eli had arrived without demand or pressure, simply offering help and respect. As night fell, they sat on the porch, sharing a simple meal of bread and cheese. The stars appeared one by one, and the quiet of the night felt less empty with him there. Naya found herself speaking freely, telling him things she had never told anyone before. The frustrations of ranch life, the weight of loneliness, and the dreams she had shelved long ago. But Eli listened, never interrupting, offering only small words of encouragement. She felt seen, heard, and strangely safe in his presence. Before leaving that night, Eli turned to her. "I hope you don't mind me staying nearby for a little while," he said softly. "I've been looking for a place to belong, and this feels right." Naya nodded, her heart pounding. She did not know what the future held, but she felt a small, cautious hope that perhaps she would not have to face it alone. As she watched him settle near the edge of the property, she realized that something had begun to change inside her. The loneliness that had been her constant companion was no longer the only presence in her life. For the first time in many years, she felt the possibility of connection, the chance that someone could truly walk beside her, not as a visitor, but as a partner. The spark was small, quiet, but it was enough to light the way toward a life she had once only dreamed of. First, and as she prepared for sleep that night, Naya whispered to herself once more, but this time with a hint of hope. Maybe I'm not so alone after all. Days passed on the ranch, and slowly a rhythm began to settle between Naya and Eli. Mornings were spent tending to animals and repairing fences, afternoons in the fields under the sun, and evenings on the porch, sharing simple meals. There was a quiet comfort in their shared work. Naya had grown used to being alone, and the presence of another adult in her daily life was both strange and surprisingly soothing. Eli's calm, steady nature complemented her energy, and she found herself laughing more often than she had in years. Despite the growing bond, Naya could feel the weight of caution lingering within her.
She had learned the hard way that trust was fragile, and men who seemed kind could easily leave without warning. Even Eli, with all his quiet understanding, could disappear at any moment. The thought of opening her heart fully terrified her, but at the same time she could not deny the warmth she felt in his presence. Sometimes, when he helped her lift a heavy barrel or calmed a frightened horse, she caught herself staring at him longer than necessary, a mix of admiration and curiosity filling her eyes. Eli, too, seemed careful with his feelings. He was not the type to rush into friendship or affection, and yet his actions spoke louder than words. He repaired broken tools without complaint, made small improvements to the barn, and always offered a kind word when Naya felt frustrated. He spoke rarely about his past, but on certain nights when the sky was clear and the air calm, he would tell fragments of his story. He had grown up moving from place to place, never settling long enough to feel rooted.
Work, or the lack of it, had forced him to wander, and relationships had been few and fleeting.
Hearing his words, Naya felt a connection she could not explain, a shared understanding of loneliness and the desire for stability.
One afternoon, while Naya was mending a section of the fence, Eli approached with a small bundle of tools in his hands. "I thought you could use these," he said, holding them out. "The old ones were worn down." She took them, feeling the weight of both the tools and his thoughtfulness. "Breath. Thank you," she said softly. "I didn't expect anyone to notice these small things."
He smiled, a quiet curve of his lips that made her heart skip a beat.
"It's the small things that matter most," he replied. There was a simplicity to his words, yet they carried meaning that Naya could feel deep in her chest. As the days turned into weeks, their connection grew stronger, but challenges began to surface. Naya's pride and fear of disappointment sometimes clashed with Eli's quiet persistence. One evening, while preparing dinner, they disagreed over a minor detail: how to repair a broken water trough. Naya preferred to do it a certain way, honed by years of experience, while Eli suggested a different method he had learned elsewhere. Words were exchanged, short and tense, and for a moment the ease between them seemed to shatter. Naya felt frustration bubbling up, not with him personally, but with the vulnerability she felt whenever he challenged her. After a few minutes of silence, Eli stepped closer and spoke gently. "I didn't mean to upset you," he said. "I just thought this way might work faster." Naya exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in her shoulders ease. "I know," she replied. "I'm just used to doing things alone."
It's hard to adjust.
He nodded, understanding, reflected in his eyes.
That moment, small as it was, became a turning point. They realized that being close meant learning to navigate differences, to respect each other's methods, and to communicate openly. It was a lesson neither had expected, but both appreciated.
The evenings they spent together became moments of reflection and quiet intimacy.
Rest. Sometimes they would sit by the fire listening to the crackling of wood and sharing stories of childhood, family, and dreams that had once seemed unreachable. Naya told him about her parents, who had taught her the ways of ranch life, and about her early dreams of having a family and a partner to share it all with. Eli spoke of towns he had wandered through, of work he had done, and of friendships that had lasted only a short time. Through these exchanges, a deeper understanding developed, one built not on words alone, but on shared experience, respect, and the recognition of each other's solitude. Yet, with closeness came fear. Naya often found herself retreating emotionally, reminding herself of past disappointments and the pain of trust betrayed. She would step back slightly, her tone sharper than intended, or her responses brief, testing Eli to see if he would remain. Each time Eli met her hesitance with patience, never pushing, but always present, proving that his interest in her was genuine. The subtle dance of attraction and caution continued, a delicate balance that neither wanted to disrupt but both knew was fragile.
One afternoon, a storm approached from the north, dark clouds rolling across the horizon. Naya and Eli worked together to secure the animals and reinforce the barn doors. The wind howled, rattling the windows and shaking the trees. As the first drops of rain fell, Naya felt a surge of anxiety. Though she had lived through many storms, this one seemed heavier, darker, and more urgent. Eli noticed her tension and placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Inspiration. We'll get through this," he said calmly. "Together." The simplicity of his words, the strength in his presence, made her heart swell. She realized that he was not just a helper or companion. He was becoming someone she could rely on, someone who might stand beside her through life's storms, both literal and figurative. After the storm passed, they inspected the ranch for damage. A few fences had collapsed, and some of the animals were frightened, but nothing was lost. Bursing side by side in the aftermath, their hands occasionally brushed and small smiles were exchanged. Naya noticed a warmth growing in her chest, a feeling she had not allowed herself to experience for years. Yet, as she worked, she also noticed the vulnerability that came with it, the fear of trusting someone completely, of opening her heart and risking pain.
She remembered the nights spent alone, whispering,
I'm so tired of being without a man, and wondered if her loneliness was about to end or if she was simply setting herself up for disappointment again.
Despite her fears, moments of shared laughter and quiet understanding continued to draw them closer.
One evening, while preparing the animals for the night, Eli helped calm a frightened horse.
Naya watched him, amazed at the ease with which he handled the animal, and felt a spark of admiration she could not ignore. "You have a way with them," she said softly. He looked at her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I've learned a few things over the years," he replied, "but you've taught me more about patience and care than I ever expected." Their eyes met, and for a brief moment the world seemed smaller, more intimate, as if only the two of them existed in that space. But just as quickly reality returned. Naya remembered the uncertainty, the risk of hope. She reminded herself that trust was earned slowly, and hearts could break in an instant. Frowned. She pulled away slightly, focusing on her chores and avoiding prolonged eye contact. Eli noticed, but did not push. He understood, in a way that others had never understood, that patience was sometimes the greatest act of love. His continued presence, unwavering and respectful, slowly began to soften the walls Naya had built around her heart. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they sat together on the porch, silent except for the sounds of animals settling down for the night. Naya felt a mixture of emotions, hope, fear, excitement, and caution all blended together. She realized that this growing bond with Eli was something she had longed for but never dared to imagine. And though the road ahead was uncertain, she also realized that allowing herself to feel, to connect, and to trust, even a little, was a risk worth taking. Before retiring for the night, Naya stood at the edge of the porch, looking out over her ranch. The fields stretched endlessly, bathed in the soft light of dusk. She thought of her parents, of the years spent alone, and of the quiet longing that had always lived in her heart. And yet she also thought of Eli, of the small moments of connection, and of the gentle strength he had shown. For the first time in many years, she felt that perhaps loneliness was not her only destiny. Perhaps someone could walk beside her, share her burdens, and offer the companionship she had longed for. And as she closed her eyes that night, a small, hopeful thought lingered in her mind. Maybe this time it will be different. Maybe I can let someone in. The day began quietly, with the sun casting a golden glow over the ranch.
Naya was already awake, checking the animals and preparing the fields for the day's work. The land looked peaceful, but there was a strange tension in the air, a dryness that made her uneasy. She noticed the wind blowing stronger than usual, carrying the faint scent of smoke from far off in the distance. Her heart quickened. Fires were dangerous, and in the dry season a small spark could turn into a disaster. She began walking toward the edge of her property, scanning the horizon for any sign of trouble. Eli appeared beside her almost silently, as if sensing her concern. "I smelled it too," he said, his voice calm but alert. "We should keep an eye out." It might be far, but the wind could change quickly. Naya nodded, grateful for his presence. Together they walked along the fences, checking for any sparks or hazards that could threaten the animals or the barn. The sun climbed higher, and the heat made the air shimmer. In the distance, a thin line of smoke became visible, a reminder of how quickly things could turn dangerous. By midday, the smoke had grown darker and the wind had shifted, carrying it closer to the ranch. Naya felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had dealt with challenges before. Storms, broken equipment, lonely nights. But nothing had scared her quite like the thought of fire threatening everything she had built. Eli quickly took charge, suggesting they move the animals to a safer enclosure and clear dry brush near the barn. His calmness steadied her nerves, and she followed his lead, trusting his judgment completely. The work was exhausting. Naya and Eli moved together in perfect coordination, lifting heavy buckets of water, securing the animals, and reinforcing fences. The smoke grew thicker, and the heat from the approaching fire made their faces burn. Naya felt her arms ache and her lungs tighten from the smoke, but she did not stop. She caught Eli's eye as they passed each other, and in that moment a silent understanding passed between them. They were in this together, and nothing else mattered. As the fire drew nearer, panic threatened to rise, but Naya forced herself to focus. She remembered the lessons her parents had taught her: patience, observation, and quick thinking. She worked tirelessly, calling out instructions to Eli as he moved animals and supplies with careful precision. Together they managed to herd the goats into a smaller pen and guide the horses into the barn. The chickens were placed in temporary cages, and buckets of water were lined around the property to prevent the flames from spreading. Despite their careful planning, the fire reached the outer edges of the land, igniting patches of dry grass. Naya's heart pounded in her chest as she grabbed a bucket and ran toward a burning patch, dousing it with water. Eli was there beside her, carrying another bucket, working in perfect unison. The heat was intense, but they moved with determination, knowing that every second counted. Naya realized, in the midst of the chaos, how much she had come to rely on Eli, not just for his help, but for his courage, his steadiness, and his presence. She felt a deep connection growing stronger with each passing moment. The smoke stung their eyes and filled their lungs, but neither of them slowed. They shouted instructions to each other over the roar of the fire, moving animals, smothering flames, and reinforcing barriers. The adrenaline coursing through their veins gave them strength. Yet exhaustion threatened to overcome them. At one point Naya stumbled, and Eli caught her arm, steadying her. She looked into his eyes, seeing concern, care, and something else, a quiet admiration that made her heart race. She realized that she trusted him completely, more than she had ever trusted anyone. Hours passed, and the fire began to recede slightly, thanks to their relentless efforts. The smoke still hung in the air, but the immediate danger had passed. Naya leaned against the barn, sweat and soot covering her face and clothes. But her body ached. But there was a strange sense of triumph in her chest. She had faced fear head-on, and she had not been alone. Eli stood nearby, equally exhausted, but his eyes met hers with a soft smile. "We did it," he said simply. Naya nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude and something deeper. an emotional bond that had been strengthened in the heat of crisis. As the evening fell, they finally took a moment to rest. The ranch was safe, though the air still smelled of smoke and the fields bore the marks of the fire. Naya and Eli sat on the porch, their clothes torn and their hands blackened with soot, sharing a quiet meal of bread and cheese. Neither spoke much at first, but the silence was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding and shared relief. Dia felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of pride, trust, and something that felt like love beginning to bloom. That night, as they prepared to sleep, Naya found herself reflecting on the day. She had faced fear, exhaustion, and uncertainty, but she had not faced it alone. Eli had been there every step of the way, steady and dependable. She realized that the feelings she had been cautiously nurturing over the past weeks were now undeniable. The bond they had developed was no longer just about friendship or companionship. It had become something deeper, something real and vital. Eli, too, lay awake that night, thinking about Naya. He had admired her strength from the first day he saw her, but today he had seen her courage, her determination, and her heart. The way she had faced the fire, never faltering, had left him in awe. He felt a protective instinct, a desire to be by her side not just as a helper, but as a partner in life. He realized that he no longer wanted to wander aimlessly. He wanted to stay, to build a life with someone who shared his values, his courage, and his longing for connection. The following morning, the ranch was quiet again, though traces of the fire remained. Naya and Eli worked together to repair the minor damage, laughing quietly as they cleaned soot-stained fences and rearranged scattered tools. The shared experience had brought them closer than ever, breaking down the walls of hesitation and fear that had lingered between them. Naya felt a sense of relief and hope, a feeling that had been foreign to her for so long. She realized that she had not just survived the fire, she had discovered a partner, someone who could stand with her through life's challenges and joys alike. Over the next few days, the bond between Naya and Ellie deepened. They worked side by side, learning each other's habits, preferences, and strengths. Naya found herself opening up more, sharing her dreams, fears, and memories without fear of judgment. Eli listened with patience and understanding, offering guidance when needed but never imposing his opinions. Their conversations became more personal, filled with laughter, shared stories, and gentle teasing. The fire had been a trial, but it had also become a turning point, a moment that revealed the depth of their connection and the possibility of a future together. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set, Naya felt a quiet courage rise within her. She turned to Eli, her voice soft but steady. "I've spent so long alone," she admitted. "I've built this life on my own, and I've been afraid to let anyone in. But I feel different with you. I feel like maybe I don't have to face everything alone anymore." Eli reached out, taking her hand in his. His grip was firm yet gentle, a promise without words. "I've been searching for a place to belong," he said quietly. "And I think I found it here, with you." Tears filled Naya's eyes, not from sadness, but from relief and joy. The fear she had carried for so long, the fear of being alone, the fear of being hurt, began to fade. In its place was hope, trust, and a growing love that felt both exciting and safe. They sat together hand in hand, watching the stars emerge one by one, feeling the quiet strength of the bond they had forged in fire, sweat, and shared determination. The experience had changed them both. Naya realized that life's challenges, no matter how daunting, were easier to face when shared with someone who truly understood her. Eli understood not only her work and her resilience, but also the quiet ache she had carried for so long. Together they had faced fear and uncertainty, and had emerged stronger, closer, and more certain of the connection between them. As night fell, they finally went inside, exhausted but content. Naya lay in her bed, listening to the distant sounds of the ranch settling for the night. She thought about the fire, the way they had worked together, and the unspoken feelings that had grown in the heat of crisis. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of peace, knowing that she had found someone who could stand beside her through both danger and quiet moments. She whispered to herself softly, "Maybe this is what I've been waiting for all along."
Eli, in a small camp nearby, thought the same. He realized that he had stopped wandering, that he had found not just a safe place to live, but a person to share life with.
The fire had been a trial, but it had also been a revelation, a turning point that changed everything. And as they both drifted into sleep, separated by only a few steps but united in heart, they knew that life together was beginning in a way neither of them could have imagined. The morning after the wildfire had passed, the ranch felt quiet and renewed. The smoke had cleared, leaving the air fresh, and the golden sun illuminated the fields that had survived the fire. Naya stood on the porch, taking in the sight of her land. Though some areas were scorched, most of the ranch remained intact. The animals were safe, the fences repaired, and life continued as it always had. But something within Naya had shifted. She no longer felt the same weight of loneliness pressing down on her. She had faced fear and uncertainty with Eli by her side, and in doing so she had discovered a new strength, both in herself and in their connection. Eli appeared beside her, carrying a small basket of fresh bread he had baked. "Morning," he said with a warm smile. "I thought we could have breakfast outside today." Naya smiled back, feeling a flutter of happiness she hadn't felt in years. Together they sat at the small wooden table on the porch, sharing a simple meal. The warmth of the sun, the smell of freshly baked bread, and the quiet sounds of the ranch created a sense of peace that had been missing from Naya's life for so long. She realized that life could be beautiful when shared with someone who cared, not just for the land, but for her heart as well. Over the next few weeks, Naya and Eli worked together to restore the ranch fully. The fire had left its mark, but it had also revealed how much they could accomplish as a team. They repaired fences, cleared debris, and tended to the recovering animals. Each task brought them closer together, not just as companions in work, but as companions in life. Naya felt a growing sense of trust and comfort. She realized that Eli was no longer just a visitor or helper. He had become a true partner, someone who shared her struggles, her triumphs, and her dreams. Their conversations deepened as well. Evenings were spent sitting by the porch, sharing stories of their pasts and hopes for the future. Naya spoke of her parents, of the lessons they had taught her, and of the dreams she had once kept hidden. Eli listened intently, offering words of understanding and encouragement. He shared memories of his travels, of friendships that had taught him resilience, and of the longing he had felt for a place to belong. Through these exchanges, they began to imagine a life together, not rushed or forced, but built steadily on trust, respect, and affection. One afternoon, as they worked together in the fields, Naya paused to watch Eli lift a heavy sack of feed. She noticed the way he moved, careful, deliberate, and strong. Her heart swelled with admiration and something deeper, a feeling she had long kept buried. She realized that she had been waiting for someone who could walk beside her as an equal, someone who would not only share in her work but also in her life. Eli noticed her gaze and smiled, a quiet acknowledgement of the connection they both felt. It was a small, silent moment, but it spoke volumes, and Naya felt a warmth spread through her chest that she had not known for years. Despite the joy and closeness, Naya sometimes felt the familiar tug of caution. Past disappointments and the fear of trusting too quickly still lingered. She reminded herself. To be patient, to allow the relationship to grow naturally.
Eli sensed this hesitation and never pushed, understanding that trust and love could not be forced.
Breath. He remained steady, patient, and kind, proving through his actions that he was not going anywhere. This consistency reassured Naya, allowing her to slowly let go of the walls she had built around her heart.
One evening after a long day of work, they sat together watching the sun set over the hills. The sky was painted in soft oranges and pinks, reflecting on the peacefulness of the ranch.
Naya leaned her head against Eli's shoulder, feeling the steady warmth of his presence. "I never thought I could feel this way again," she whispered.
I was so used to being alone, so used to protecting myself, that I forgot what it felt like to trust someone.
Eli gently took her hand in his. "You can trust me," he said softly. "I'm not leaving. I want to be here, with you, for as long as you'll let me." Her heart swelled with emotion. For the first time in years, she felt truly safe and understood, and she realized that she had found what she had been longing for all along. Life on the ranch settled into a new rhythm. Mornings were filled with work and laughter, afternoons with care and attention to the land and animals, and evenings with quiet moments of connection. Naya noticed small changes in herself. She smiled more easily, laughed more freely, and felt a lightness in her heart that had been absent for so long. Eli, too, seemed more at peace, finding stability and contentment in the life they were building together. The ranch, once a symbol of her solitude, had become a place of love, partnership, and hope. One day, as they repaired a section of fence together, Naya paused to look at Eli. "I've spent so long thinking I could only rely on myself," she said. "But I realize now that life is better when shared." "You've shown me that I don't have to face everything alone." Eli smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We face things together," he said simply. "That's what matters, and I'm here for the long haul." Naya felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not from sadness, but from joy and relief. She had waited for so long for someone like Eli, and now he was here, standing beside her, steady and true. Their bond continued to grow, built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. They celebrated small victories together: the first bloom in the garden, a repaired section of fence, a healthy newborn calf, and found joy in the simple everyday moments. Naya realized that these small joys, shared with someone who understood and valued her, were more meaningful than any grand gesture could ever be. She no longer felt the ache of loneliness that had once defined her life. As the seasons changed, so did their relationship. Spring brought new growth to the ranch, and with it, a new chapter in their lives. Naya and Eli worked side by side, planting crops, tending to animals, and dreaming of the future. They spoke of building a life together, of supporting one another through challenges and joys alike. The fear of loneliness had faded, replaced by a sense of belonging, partnership, and love. Naya realized that she had found not just a companion, but a true partner, someone who shared her values, her dreams, and her heart. One evening, as they sat together watching the stars appear in the night sky, Naya reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She thought of the years spent alone, the struggles, the quiet longing, and the fire that had tested their courage. Each experience had led them to this moment, together, stronger, and ready to face whatever life might bring.
She turned to Eli, her eyes filled with emotion.
Desperate, softly. "For staying, for caring, for showing me that I don't have to be alone." Eli took her hand, squeezing it gently. Breaths. "I didn't do anything special," he said. "I just wanted to be here with you." "And I always will be." Naya smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace and happiness. Or beyond.
She realized that the loneliness she had carried for so long was gone, replaced by love, trust, and companionship. The ranch, once a symbol of solitude, had become a home filled with warmth, laughter, and hope.
And in Eli, she had found someone to share not just the work, but her heart and her life. The days that followed were filled with joy and contentment. Naya and Eli continued to work together, care for the animals, and nurture the land. They shared meals, stories, and quiet moments of connection. Breaths. The ranch thrived, as did their relationship. Naya no longer whispered the words that had haunted her for years. Instead, she looked toward the future with hope, knowing that she was no longer alone. One quiet evening as the sun set over the hills, Naya stood on the porch with Eli by her side. She looked out over the fields, the animals grazing peacefully, and the land she had worked so hard to protect. She felt a sense of gratitude and fulfillment she had never known before. Turning to Eli, she said with a smile, "I used to be so tired of being without someone, but now I feel like I finally found where I belong." Eli smiled back, wrapping his arm around her. "And I've found where I belong, too," he said. Together they watched the sun dip below the horizon, feeling the quiet strength of their bond and the promise of a future filled with love, partnership, and hope. And so the Apache woman who had once felt the weight of loneliness now stood with someone who loved and understood her, not in her shadow, but as her equal. Life on the ranch continued, full of challenges and joys, but now shared, no longer faced alone. Naya had discovered that love and companionship could arrive when least expected, and that true connection could transform even the most solitary of lives. She had waited for it patiently, and in Eli, she had finally found it, her partner, her friend, and her heart's companion.